Hey, everybody, welcome to the Unconventional Therapist Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave. I'm joined here with my co host, Greg. Greg, it's good to see you, dude. We missed you last week.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah. So sorry about last week. My mother was sick in the hospital. She's doing a little bit better now. But this has been a roller coaster week for me, Dave. I mean, really, I've
Yeah.
had some really ups and downs. So my mother's doing better. That's great. I'm very grateful for that. I took a trip to New Hampshire, which I sent Dave pictures of course.
Yeah.
And I did that partly because I have this wild fear of heights. And I thought maybe driving through the mountains might, be a little bit of exposure. And it was intense and I had a hard time, but I did it and I'm happy that I did. Um,
What did you do
although,
exactly?
well, we went up there, we went tubing. We
Nice.
drove around the White Mountains and drove along cliffs. We did this thing called like Franconia Notch, maybe, and it was like really intense. A
Mhm.
really intense thing. It was like I was like, am I in Switzerland right now, or am I 3 hours
That
from
was
my
your
house?
first time ever going there?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I
Well,
only
you've
say that for anyone listening because it's a few hours away, but it's kind of like a popular, I guess, vacation spot for us New Englanders.
yeah, no, I'd never. It's wild. So you've driven that,
Um, I don't know like exactly what area that you did, but I mean, I've definitely done a lot up there in the White Mountains.
and do you ever feel like nervous driving with those like looming mountains, or like driving along the side of a cliff or anything?
Not so much, but like I get what you're saying. I mean, there's some parts of like the Cankamungus Highway which goes
That's where
across.
Cankamungus Highway. That's where I was.
Oh, you did that. Yeah, I get what you're
Yes.
saying. I mean, that's a really popular spot to go in the fall because as you can imagine, it looks beautiful with all the yellow and orange leaves.
Yeah.
So I know those spots you're talking about. Those are like a little narrow, but
Yeah.
could be scarier, but yeah, not if you're
Uh,
a little iffy around that stuff. I can definitely understand.
and then, of course, there's one more thing which I was kind of alluding to with you, Dave, earlier, but I didn't want to like. I just want people to know that like I'm going through something that I'm really feeling high anxiety about. And if anybody else is going through this, which a lot of people are right now in our area, it is sort of terrifying and frustrating. So on the way home, I got a text message, but I didn't realize it because I was driving. And it like someone was trying to log on to my bank account. And so I missed that. And when I got home, I tried to log on through my phone and it said like your account's blocked. So I called the bank and they asked for my PIN. You have a PIN to identify yourself. And I gave it to them. Been the same PIN for literally 20 years I've had this bank.
Yeah.
They're like, that's not you. And I'm like, it's me. I'm great. It's me. Like they're like, no, that's not that PIN is invalid. I'm like, no, it's me. And then they asked me like a couple of private questions which were able to be changed too, which had no bearing with me. And so right now, you know, work a lot and I managed for the first year to like save a decent amount of money, like a pretty good amount of money, even after Christmas, and it is gone. Every last dime. And it's scary, and I'm talking to the bank and I fully trust that, they'll do an investigation and get the money back to me. But man, a lot of people are going through that right now with this, like there was a security breach in Rhode Island. I don't know if it's connected to that. But it's a scary thing. And like this identity theft thing and that violation of it, like I think it's gonna be a topic that we've got to explore at some point
Yeah.
because I'm feeling it.
Jeez. Is it a big bank that you belong to
It's
that this happened with?
USAA, so it's like it's for
Wow.
veterans and stuff. It's like supposed to be very protected. And what's tough though is it's an online bank, so it's not like and the first thing I was thinking is like I need to get a local bank where I can walk in and say, "Hey, I'm Greg Charpentier," not over the phone being, trying to sell myself to someone who can't do anything. All they see is a number. So it's a wild thing. It's like a new frontier that like you're stepping into with like AI and phishing and how these people are able to. Dave, you know my shortcomings when it comes to technology. Did I do something silly and respond to like a message or something that I shouldn't have? Maybe. I don't know. But it's pretty intense. Pretty intense.
Hmm.
I mean, it's been a tough one for me, Dave.
So this was just today kind of dealing with this?
Yeah.
What do
Yeah.
you got to do tonight?
So they're the fraud person. They're gonna talk to me tonight. They literally said things like, um, if we can get it back, we'll do it this way. Right? And I'm like, if we can get it back, I'm like, you have to get it back.
Yeah,
Like you
yeah,
you
yeah.
have to get it back. Like this is you're federally insured. So I think they just say that because they probably want to do some kind of investigation to make sure like I had nothing to do with it or something. Like
Right,
it's not like
right.
a double dip kind of thing or whatever.
Sure.
Um, so I'm like, yeah, investigate. Hurry up though. Um, just intense.
Jeez. And the funny thing is, like, I haven't really had something as significant as that happen, but like sometimes I get annoyed with prevention stuff. So, for
Yeah.
example, if you're out of state and you make a purchase, your bank might block it because if they don't know you're out of state, like, have you ever had something like that happen? Like, you try to use a card, well, you
Apparently
don't.
my bank's a little easy going with that kind of stuff.
Well, I've had to like it happen where like they wouldn't let me make a purchase, they or something like that. I forget what it was, but and you have to call your bank at your nearest convenience. Or one time there was this charge I was trying to go through, and they like asked if I knew what it was, and I genuinely didn't know what it was, but I was away. So I was like, if I say no right now, though, they're gonna like cancel my card, and I need my card because I'm away. So what do I do right now?
Oh,
And I said, just let it go, I guess, let the charge go, and I'll deal with it when I get back. And then the whole time I'm like, oh my God, what if that charge like is like the start of like something larger? And like now I'm gonna be, yeah, it's a lot.
Dave,
So
someone had literally um put their name as a joint account person on my account, a name
that's
I've
crazy.
never heard of, I've
Who
never
was it?
seen of
What's
it.
the name?
Shanika Mason.
I know her.
So it's funny because it's probably like obviously it's like no one would put their real name if they were doing something like super fraudulent like that,
Maybe
but
they did.
maybe they did. And um they, so when they send like a message to your phone.
Yeah.
So when I was logging in, the lady on the phone was helping me log in. It said, should we send the text message to this phone number? This obviously the last four numbers, but it wasn't mine. And I'm like, oh my God, they managed to change every little thing in such a short amount of time and just
I always said
empty.
Shaniqua is like just so good with technology and stuff.
Better than me.
Shaniqua
Better than
Mason.
me. Unbelievable. I mean, it's just something that I don't wish upon anybody. It's not, and the things I'm obviously trying to do, like the therapist things, like my kids are healthy, I'm healthy. We're not gonna starve. Like I, you know, have a little bit of cash put aside to make sure that, I guess in case of emergency. And so we're gonna be all right. But um it's such a frustrating thing to feel a little bit for the first time in years, like a little bit of financial security, and then to have it pulled out from under you is such a
Yeah.
nefarious,
Well,
like, sort of thing.
you just gotta, stay in that mindset that like they'll you should get your money back
Yeah.
ASAP.
If not, I won't stop fighting. I mean, I'll go whatever I have to do to like kind of get it back because it's a good amount, but we'll see. So that's that, Dave. That's my nightmare. A little scary tale for the Christmas season.
Hmm.
Maybe we can add on to that a little bit with this
Yeah.
sort of late, obviously, episode because of last week, but you know, it's a tradition. And maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. Like, well, now it's supposedly, or for a little while, it was a tradition of telling ghost stories. But Dave, I think this winter, midwinter especially, always has this idea of like death looming. I mean, from ancient times, that's what like winter is all about, right? Even the pagans, like we don't put wreaths on our door because it's just tradition. We put the wreath on the door because the people looked around and all they see is pine trees. It's the only thing that can survive the winter. So they say, we need some of that magic on our doors and to protect us from the dark winter spirits, right? So, like, in terms of horror, Halloween is sort of an amateur compared to what we're dealing with here in the winter, right?
Yeah.
It's Christmas is more and Chris like horror filled than Halloween ever could be, and I think maybe that's a thing for you. Maybe you can have more of an affinity for this holiday, right?
Well, recently I never really associated Christmas with like ghost stories or anything of that nature. And then it kind of dawned on me that like, wow, there is such a presence of like ghost stories, and so the topic today, the Charles Dickens, classic tale, A Christmas Carol, is essentially a ghost story.
It is.
And then I'm like, I'm thinking that as we're reading this, and then also I'm hearing Christmas music as I'm going in and out of places over the past week, and I hear 1,000 times it's the most wonderful time of the year, and embedded in that song is a line that just blew my freaking socks off.
Man, Andy Williams,
And he's
Scary Ghost
saying,
Stories,
yeah,
Tales of
he'll
the
be
Glories.
sharing ghost stories. Yeah, what was it again?
There'll
Sh-
be
Sharing ghost
Scary Ghost
stories
Stories and Tales of the Glories of Christmases Long, Long
of
Ago.
Christmases long, long ago. That for whatever reason, I just happened to be tuning into that song during that line, and I was like, "What is happening here?" Clearly, there is a connection with Christmas and ghost stories.
Dave was like, "Is Christmas my new best friend?" I think
It actually did make me appreciate it more, but I've been embracing it more and more as the more recent years. So it was kind of already happening. But yeah, wild.
it's wild.
Never thought about this before. Never. And then I thought, It's a Wonderful Life. Not really like ghost, but like sort of ghostish if you
Sort of
think about
ghostish.
it. That ability to be able to like view things. I don't know how I actually haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life like
Dave,
fully.
that
I
is
know.
something you
I've
need
seen
to
bits and
fix.
pieces a
Yeah.
thousand times. I've seen other movies that like were supposed to resemble it. Um, but yeah, there's like a something there with that too. That's kind of like
Like what
watching.
could be? It's like supernatural,
Yes, supernatural, I guess, would be the better explanation for it.
And Dave, whenever we like to talk about creepy things, we tend to lean a little Victorian, don't we? Like it's a through line throughout this podcast. We always kind of had a, and I don't know if you would call this is the Victorian era, but it's also Dickensian, which sort of when I say Dickensian, it's like it evokes coal and smog and buildings and London streets and
And
kids with hats
Christmas,
and Christmas, right?
which we talked about when we talked about like the origins of Christmas a couple of years back. Dickensian is the Christmas that we know today. He pretty much like defined it. He stylized it, right?
Hmm.
In so many ways. The only thing that was added was then Coca-Cola gave us a Santa Claus
They sure did.
figure, right?
Yeah, they sure did.
So, I mean, he when we think about what our Christmases look like, it's much because of Charles Dickens.
Okay, so let's get into this Dickens for a little bit. So in 1843, Dickens is only 31 years old. All right, that's pretty incredible. And he's already success. Oliver Twist is already published.
He's already twisting it up out there.
He's already twisted. So he writes this tiny little novella, which is really well received. But the thing about it is, it only sells 6,000 copies and he doesn't make a ton of money on it. And that's because he went really elaborate and beautiful with the book. So if you had one of these like first editions Christmas carols, it would be worth so much money. It's like gold embossed. But the problem with that was like not a lot of people had enough money to buy it. So only the rich were the only ones that were able to kind of get their hands on it.
Which is sort of interesting considering what this tale is really saying in so many ways.
Yeah, and well, but
Did
here's
all
the other side of
proceeds
that.
go to the poor?
Here's the interesting thing about that though. Like who really needs to hear this story,
The rich.
right? Not really the poor.
They're living
And
it. So yeah.
I think Dickens in this when he's writing about Scrooge too, he's kind of and maybe we'll talk about this later. He's writing his shadow. He's so conflicted with worrying about money and the responsibility of his family. He's got 5 kids. He kind of forgets what's important in life. Like he has, so before this comes out, he's written a couple other books and they're not really doing that well. So Scrooge is this idea of what if I'm just focusing on work? What if I'm just focusing on money? Is this like who I become, right? Because as a child, he's experienced poverty. He has probably has like this sort of aversion to that or, anxiety that it's gonna, he's gonna fall back into that. He doesn't want that for himself. He doesn't want that for his kids. Um, so this is for him maybe a tale to sort of check himself,
Mm,
right? To kind of
sure.
be like, don't, it's important to worry about money, but don't let it sort of completely corrupt who you are.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things about this tale is I mean, it's not super, super long, like you said. It's also set up in staves. And what the hell is a stave?
Hmm.
I could have
I
looked
want to
that
write a
up,
book
but I
that's set
decided
up.
not to.
I want to write a book that's set up in Dave's.
Dave won. It's like what, five staves, I think.
It's five staves, yeah, and I guess like staves would, and you know what? I didn't look it up
It's like a
either, but
chapter.
it seems like it's like, yeah, it's really like broken up into almost like individual little, not stories, not,
It's
and it's,
it's almost as if you were going to make this into a play. It'd be like
uh,
stave one, right?
yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And maybe it's set up like staving to me sounds something musical. Like maybe it's set up like in terms of like a symphony would be set up in, you know, different sort of tones, you
The
know?
crazy thing is there is definitely a regular definition for it, and neither of us want to look it up. We are
No.
being very lazy, and I
Yeah.
refuse actually to look it up. So
And like,
we'll
you know, you let the listeners tell us who got closer or who's getting close. Probably neither one of us.
neither one. So stave one, we got our introduction to Scrooge. I almost called him Stooge. That'd have been a different story. So we got our introduction to him, and we meet him in this counting house that is it's where his business is being conducted, and he's there with his employee, Bob Cratchit, and we get this introduction to a man who is just very cold, I would say, and just like the counting house itself, because he
Mm.
refuses to heat it. And he even warns Cratchit that he will fire him if he takes a piece of coal to heat it. So he's just this cold, serious, grumbly, almost resentful man who seems to be resentful, I guess, of those around him who maybe prioritize things other than business and money. Because life
Yeah.
to him is all about business and money. More importantly than money, profit, not just money, right?
Yeah, he doesn't want to hear about any kind of like money is everything to him. It's almost like the old-fashioned definition of greed. It's like wealth for wealth's sake, right?
Yeah,
Like the
right,
means that it's money to just have money. It's not for a means for anything. It's just
right. It's just to have
greed.
it.
Yeah.
Yep. And because he's definitely not using it, and that's like a comment that his family makes at one point in time. It's not like he's using it to live this lavish life. No, he's literally just having it to have it. And he's living pretty crappy conditions, I would say, if he's
Yeah.
in a cold
Yeah, his nephew
counting
says
house.
something like that to him, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Like he says something along the lines of like,
I wish I wrote down the quote, but yeah.
yeah, like he like the like Scrooge is like, why are you so happy you don't have any money? And he's like, why are you so sad you have all the money? Something
Yeah.
along those lines,
Yep.
you know? And it's true.
So and that kind of sets up his nephew enters at the counting house and invites Scrooge to the Christmas dinner, which we find out that he does every year. And Scrooge obviously rejects it because Christmas is a bunch of, what is it, Greg?
Humbug.
Humbug. What the hell is humbug? You
I
know,
don't know.
another
I
thing
didn't
I
know
could
that
have looked
either, but
up,
I was
refused
happy to
to.
hear it. Like when I read it, I was like, oh,
Mhm.
they actually do go with the
I was
humbug.
wondering if that was something that we just kind of like adopted over
Yeah.
time, or if it was genuinely in there. It is in there. But he does describe Christmas as nothing but a bunch of profit loss. So that's his view of Christmas. It is a waste of time, a bunch of humbug. That night, he is visited by the very first ghost of all the ghosts that he meets. And that is the ghost of his former business partner, who is now dead, named Jacob Marley. Whoa. And he is appearing in his bedroom, and he has a long chain wrapped around him. And he ends up explaining that this chain is one that he created in life through his own selfish deeds, and that he is doomed to wander the earth and witness the happiness of what he could have had while he was alive, had he actually gave a crap about others. That's a direct quote.
Yeah, so it's like when I think of a spirit, like a spirit that's gonna like ascend into heaven, maybe, right? It's light and it flies up. There's space for it. Like when you read Dante, like hell is set up like an upside down cone. So when you're in the bottom of hell, like there's nowhere to go. And so it seems like this spirit is chained down to earth and it's not allowed to fly and be free. It's like the choices that you make in life can really weigh you down or
Yeah,
set you
that's what
free.
those chains represent. That, and what he's basically telling is the chains were forged because he doesn't enjoy his life. He doesn't care about others, like identifying that the way that you enjoy or you make the most of life is through caring about others.
Yeah. And like doing good, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
So basically it's almost like purgatory, right? He has to wander the earth where he was and watch other people's happiness. So, it's this idea that like you kind of just continue to exist, but without, but now you're more self-aware. So almost like hell is being aware of everything you did wrong and
Yeah.
everything you didn't appreciate. It's such an interesting concept if you think about it.
Yeah, no, it's like keeps it's there's spirituality, but there's no mention of like heaven and hell in it, which is interesting,
Right,
right? That's
right,
that is interesting. And that is kind of hell though. It's like look at what I could have been, look at how my actions affected people. Like my how happy I never experienced any happiness and I never will. It sucks that he has to come to Scrooge and say, "It's too late for me. This is me
right.
now."
Yeah. No, and that's essentially what he ends up warning Scrooge of is that Scrooge is on his path to having an even longer chain because, he's taken all this even further. Um, so, one of the interesting lines that happens here is that Scrooge he says something about he must soon leave because he's got to continue his wandering, and Scrooge says something about like you must be moving slowly if you still haven't seen the whole world by now, like kind of you know taking into consideration the amount of time that he's been passed away.
Mm,
And Marley ends up telling him that he's traveled fast, but there's no amount of space that can contain his regret. That's like such a powerful line right there
yeah.
if you think about that.
Wow,
So
that is actually pretty deep. This is a beautifully written sort of story too. And Scrooge, where I think a lot of people mess up when they're like, in the various adaptations of the story, it's like he's kind of like quick and funny and I don't know, sarcastic even.
yeah.
So he's kind of an interesting guy, and I think they missed that a little bit. Because weirdly, Dave, it's like he is awful in every way, but like we're somehow rooting for him though, right?
Well, you know what helps is it honestly, when you hear the story, when you like the actual story itself, it doesn't take long before you get to see a change in him,
Mm,
like a reflection or even an acknowledgement of, oh boy, right? I think almost as soon as he meets Jacob Marley, you start to see that change of attitude where it's like, oh, okay, this I've been doing something wrong here, or I don't want this. What he's doing, I don't want that.
he doesn't want
That
that.
you start to see it almost immediately. So it's rather quick. Where I feel like sometimes in the adaptations, there's a longer build up. So,
Yeah.
but anyways, yeah. So one of the things that Marley expresses is just being upset at Scrooge for like his focus on business and just explaining that the business he should be more focused on is human welfare. And even on Christmas he's not able to show charity or kindness. So Marley over time has obviously come to an understanding of his ways and is warning Scrooge of all these things. At this point, this is when Marley tells Scrooge that he's going to be visited by three ghosts. One's going to be visiting him at 1 a.m. this night, the second, the night after, the next night at the same time, and a third one on the following night at midnight. So 3 consecutive nights. I always had it wrong in my head. I always thought it was the same night, three ghosts, but no, it's 3 consecutive nights. And he sleeps through the entire days.
Yeah, it's strange. I kind of never. I always thought it was like one after the other, bang, bang,
Yeah.
bang, too. That's how kind of how it's always represented. So let's get into
Because it
the.
doesn't make sense, but okay.
No, okay, right. Yeah, it's too long
Yeah. So now
of a
you're on like
stretch.
December 28th.
So yeah, exactly. And I think the adaptations do a good job of like switching that and being like, no, because we got to like make Christmas happen. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? He's
Right.
got to change on Christmas. So the Ghost of Christmas Past, or well, to me, it kind of represents memory, repressed memory, probably, because Scrooge's point of view changes when the spirit shines a light on the past, and he gets to see the choice points in his life that where like that's kind of put him on the wrong path. Whether it was like not really being paid attention to at school, or whether it was, finding love and choosing something like choosing monetary gain over that love. Like he can see these choice points where like if he had taken one path, it would have led one way. Like he get to see like I can't remember the girl he loved. What was her name?
I don't remember the name. Yeah.
But he saw her in the like got to see like that she got married, and then the husband comes home and like tells her, he's like, "Oh, I saw Scrooge today," and he was just sitting in his office counting money, looking angry, right? So it's like that could have been him. He could have had this
Yeah.
life where he was with her, like enjoying her, and having this different future. Like what could have been?
I'm a little thrown off because I have watched now besides this how like reading the story, I've also watched a bunch of adaptations. So I'm kind of confusing some of the origin of some, or if one thing was in another. There's a statement that she makes, and I don't know if it was in the adaptation that I watched or if it was in the story as well. But basically she says something to him about him choosing an idol over love, like
Yeah.
over her, right? So he's fallen in love with an idol. And I thought that was like such a great statement to make because it's exactly what's happened. He's chosen money over actual love and like human connection, right?
Yeah, and what's interesting is when they, and we talk more about it in the present, but it's like you get to kind of, and even in the future, you get to see that like the money, especially in the future, is and the things is just ripped right from him as soon as he dies. But when you're looking at the Cratchit family or something like that, when Tiny Tim dies, or when he sees that future, it's like that love is so powerful, it's so there. It's like it's you can't just get rid of that. That's
Right.
something that's intangible and important. And I also think like when I'm thinking about this, it's like yes, this ghost is taking him to the past, present. I mean the past, and um, it's almost like we can do that in our own mind too. Like we can time travel in our own mind and go back to our past and see like where we, made the wrong choice and how could we sort of change that. The fruit, like we can't really change the choices that we made in the past. Those choices are sort of there. Like this is our path. This is where we are. So like when we were at that choice point, we could have made a choice and there's like think about it like just like fingers stretching out or branches stretching out. There's a million different paths he could have took and made his life a lot different. So now here he took a certain path and now here he is in this kind of terrible point in his life. But in this present moment, we forget that ahead of us again are a branch of choices that we can take and kind of put us in a different direction again. So it's like we always have this opportunity to look at where we are. Because I mean, we are all kind of like we're in the present, but like as soon as it passes pretty quick. So we're kind of always in the past too, right? We always have this opportunity to change. And I just think it's so interesting that this ghost sort of makes this reflection. So it's like he's getting a lot of cool opportunities here. He's seeing what his afterlife could look like already. Like if he doesn't change, he's seeing where it went wrong. And, you know, I think that, we should, Christmas is a time to have that like end of year reflection where it's like, all right, well, this is where I kind of went wrong this year. Like, how do I use this as a choice point to kind of put things right back on the right
Right.
track?
One of the things
And
the Ghost of the Christmas Past does for him is it gives him this advantage because it's really easy to make choices when you don't see how it affects others. So
mhm,
he makes choices based on what he thinks is his value, right? And I
mhm,
don't think that that's really what his value was. I think that at some point he made the choice that he was going to prioritize money and business, right? And that nothing else was going to matter. And I don't think that we're seeing now that that's not really the case because when he actually sees the love lost, how it impacted others, he starts to feel badly, right? He starts to
yeah,
feel like, oh, wow, like how did that impact them? He starts to have regret. Now we're seeing what his value was, right? That it actually
right.
wasn't
Like how
just
much
about money.
money
Yeah,
How much money would you have given to make that relationship work, right? Now that you
right.
see it, like for
Yeah.
what would all those years with the love of your life be worth to you now? I mean, is there a price tag for that stuff? I also think it's important or interesting at least that the ghost of Christmas Past appears at time to be both young and old. And I think that is something that's interesting that exists in all of us. And I think it's cool that it's coming up in a Christmas story because our lives should be a balance of like young and old. I mean, especially during Christmas time, we should kind of really lean into that young nature inside of us and the fun and the carefree attitude. I just think having that ability to kind of tap into that the inner child, I hate to use that, but I don't think that's kind of cool, especially during Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And I think it's also cool that the ghost is essentially like a big candle or a little candle, but whatever. It's like got like almost like a flame for a head,
yeah,
and like that's to illuminate, maybe.
it's a very interesting design, I guess you would say. I don't
Yeah,
know how
yeah. I
to
wonder what he was
describe it.
like. What is he going for with that? But I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sure maybe at the time people really understood that a lot easier.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Dave? Take us into the present.
Yes. So the ghost of present it comes in represented as this jolly giant. He's got holly in his hair. I mean, a lot of like the movie adaptations, he's kind of like this jovial, like long haired
Hmm.
individual, I guess you would say. But apparently he's got this magic robe that can transport them to the streets of London when you tug on it. So it's kind of this interesting thing. And the first place they go as they start to roam the streets of London, they go to Bob Cratchit's house and he shows Scrooge what their family gathering looks like on Christmas. So he gets to see the whole family enjoying their Christmas, looking happy, even though they have very little. He sees the little beloved Tiny Tim saying, "God bless us, everyone." And
Yeah.
and Scrooge asks if the boy will live, which I think is an interesting question for Scrooge to even care about, right? Like it's interesting that Scrooge even thinks to ask that. And the ghost answers that there will be one less at the table unless something in the future is altered. So Scrooge then has some kind of emotional response to this. And the spirit, it's funny because I feel like the ghost of Christmas present is a little spiteful. He gets
Hmm.
like irked with Scrooge frequently and likes to throw things back at him pretty frequently. So he's a little
Yeah.
bit of like, here's a taste of your own medicine, and also like you suck. So
Yeah.
he tells Scrooge, or he reminds Scrooge of his own words when he basically said something along the lines to like people collecting donations that the poor should die to reduce the surplus population.
Mhm.
So that was thrown back at
So
Scrooge,
yeah, so
which
it's easy to make those blanket statements and like have these feelings about people,
until you
but then
see
when
it.
you hear the individual stories and see the stories, it's harder to feel
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah. And then the ghost kind of says something along the lines of like Tiny Tim probably being more fit to live than Scrooge. So he kind of throws it back at him. The ghost then brings him to his nephew Fred's house, the one who invited him over for Christmas. And he watches that family celebrate. And the nephew tells them all that Scrooge refused. So he gets to witness that. And then they all question why he continues to ask him anyway. And the nephew insists that he will continue to offer an invitation every year in case one year he finally shows up. So just kind of like getting to see that, even though he's the way he is, there people around him aren't necessarily giving up on him. Even Bob Cratchit, I think, gives like a cheers to Scrooge
Yeah,
while
to
at
my
the dinner
boss. Yeah.
table, and the other ones around the table are kind of like, but
Well, I think it's interesting what they're doing because it's like, hey, I'm this person, these are my values, and this is the way I behave. I'm not gonna let some crappy person change who I am. I'm not gonna turn into a spiteful, mean person because this person's in my life. I'm gonna
sure.
stay true to my morals and my values, and I think
I
that's
mean, he's
cool.
definitely Dickens here is definitely, painting a picture of, individuals without a lot of wealth still being very respectable and loyal and I don't know, overall just good people
Hmm.
despite and not being angry, which, is exactly the opposite of the person who has way less reason to be angry. So it's kind of like that contradiction to what you would assume both cases to be. But then at one point, he sees it all. He's enjoying watching this. He asks to stay for one more game, and he witnesses them play a game where they are all guessing what animal nephew Fred is thinking of. And the answer eventually of the animal is he's thinking of Scrooge, which, they all have a laugh about. And but then he still reiterates that he wishes his uncle a Merry Christmas. So even when they're kind of, making jokes about him, they're still being somewhat respectful, I guess you would say. But at this point, the Scrooge notices that the ghost is starting to age, and the ghost informs him that he has a very short life and that it will end at midnight, and it lasts only as long as the current Christmas. And Scrooge starts to notice this is a very strange turn of events that like there's this claw-like foot under the ghost's robe. The ghost opens his robe, and there's these two starving children under there, and
Hmm.
they represent the man's children. The boy is ignorance and the girl is want. And these are kind of like representative of the indictment of mankind in the city of London, although some try to deny or ignore their existence.
Yeah,
So
and
I don't know, what do you
Dickens
make of
probably
this
that.
part?
I mean, that probably comes from Dickens having worked in those awful conditions as a child, like where he comes up with like Oliver Twist and stuff like this, where I think he has a real critique towards, you know, the upper classes and their ignorance, their unwillingness to see that there's starving people and that there's could be something done about it. Like it doesn't need to be that way,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
And that is,
that fits in line with what the ghost ends up saying to Scrooge, because Scrooge asks, "Are there any resources to help?" And the ghost says, again, kind of pointing back Scrooge's own words, um, "Are there no prisons or workhouses?" So,
mhm.
Scrooge's answer to everything was, "We have places we could put them, right?"
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and
And we
then
still kind of feel that way, right? Like, do you still sort of, I don't know if you're completely honest with yourself. Like, we have a homeless problem in Rhode Island just like they do everywhere else. And it's like, you just, don't we all just kind of put it out of our mind?
it's one of those things. It just feels like, why is there not some kind of answer?
Hmm.
But
I know.
we try to obviously not face it ourselves because it makes us
Hmm.
uncomfortable, right?
It does. Yeah.
So the
So
clock
we
strikes
remain
midnight.
ignorant.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The ghost disappears. And then that brings us to our final ghost.
Okay. So this is the one we all kind of, always been my
Least favorite?
favorite. I know I kind of like the future one because, you know, like we talked about before, this is where he makes his sort of change. Like he kind of realizes that, yeah, he's rich. But what is that really? Like when he sees the Cratchits, like when you were talking about, like those are the ones that have the true wealth. And, it's more to do with how they act towards each other versus what they have. So you can kind of fill yourself up with a good feeling by your actions, not by your possessions. You know what I mean? Like you can surround yourself with possessions, but that's not going to change your mood or the way you feel. So I like how they also call it the ghost of Christmas yet to come. That's a cooler way of saying future. And it's ominous, it represents the unknown, it's anxiety, you know, it's I don't know. Do you think that this ghost of the future would appear the same way for everyone, or is this just what this shrouded, imposing figure is this just the way it is for Scrooge because he's led such a terrible life, right? Like
Would
if
you
your
even
future
see
was
the
bright,
would you even see the ghost of the future if you're not Scrooge?
that's right.
If you're living a
Yeah,
different
but you
life?
know what's cool about this, Dave, that I think that you would probably like is it's gothic. It's so gothic in every way. It's during the witching hour. It's in the middle of the night. Scrooge calls it a solemn phantom. He talks about how his legs shake beneath him, and this figure. I mean, it's literally the depiction of the Grim Reaper, right? This is
Yeah, that's what
this
I've
is what
always
we have
thought.
is
Yep.
yeah, like it's the symbol of death, I think. And the ghost shows Scrooge's own tombstone. And I think this is a really cool, important thing when it comes to change, because it's like when you're seeing your tombstone, it's very stoic. It's that remember you will die thing. Like, what have you brought into the world? How have you created meaning and how have you done good? Like, if he's asking himself those reflections, he's like, oh my God, I'm going to die and I need to do something. I need to do something about it now. Like, can you look back at your life and be proud, or were you ever really happy, or what is wealth? What is your goal? What are your values? Like he has to ask himself all these things, like is it's almost like he finds the true meaning of life right here in the face of his own death.
Yeah.
Like he finds out what's important. And I think that's really interesting. And I think that's a lesson to us all. I think it's important to remember that your life is finite and, how have you been living it?
Yeah.
You know? And then for me,
So,
that's, yeah, what are your thoughts on the future, Christmas future?
well, I mean, obviously, this is like you said, this is that moment where he has that big turn of attitude, and he kind of sees the error in his ways. But the line that struck me as so important for this whole thing, he says, "I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirit of all three will be present in me." And I think that there is no more important um, message than that right there. That is literally the thing that, I mean, we spend so much time investing in talking to
Mhm.
patients in therapy about, in trying to be present in our own lives. You can't live in any of those solely. You can't live in your past. That's the depression zone, right? You can't live in the
Absolutely.
future. That's the anxiety zone. I mean, you try your best to live in the present, but you will always be at risk of repeating the same mistakes or not being fully aware of what's ahead of you and taking, opportunities that could be smart if you're not aware of your past and present. So you have to have a little bit of all three. You can't invest too much time in any of them. You have to kind of like embrace all of them.
Yeah, I totally agree with that because we in this field, there's always this, the present's important. And I think there's a place for the, you know, sitting with your emotions and maybe even thinking about the past and not trying to avoid it and accepting that it was there. And like that could be a
Yeah,
part of the present. But I think that like understanding where you came from is a very important tool to not ending up where you don't want to be. I also think looking into the future is important too because you have to orient yourself with a future that you can see that you want where you want to be and something to strive towards. So like these
sure.
are all you're right, these are all very important. And I think it's again, we've talked about this model for a case conceptualization oversimplified is where were you in your life? Where are you now? Where do you want to be? And like what's getting in the way? What needs to change? So
Yeah.
this is that framework, a perfect framework for, you know, change. I think that's genius.
There are some really important like other points that are made that all kind of fall in line with this with the story and just like how we should embrace life. The first one that I wanted to point out was it can be really easy to move forward with actions when you stay unaware of the repercussions towards others.
Mhm.
So I think it's like really important that, and this kind of goes in line with that thing that we keep talking about where like, we live in this society where it's all about, I have to prioritize myself, I got to work on me, but you also have to consider others, right? We can't live in a world where we only consider ourselves. I think there's many
In
reasons for
fact, that's
that.
like it's a bad recipe, right? To
It's a
just kind
bad
of be concerned
recipe.
about it. Yeah, it
And
really is.
Scrooge is so guilty of that. He never
Yeah.
considers others. He only considers himself and the thing that he's prioritized amongst all things, which is money. So not only is it not him considering another person, it's him considering this other thing and just not considering anyone else. Barely even himself, to be honest. He's never even considered his own happiness. So how
Mhm.
can you ever live a happy life if you don't even know what makes you happy, right? The
Yeah. No.
the other thing is so we'll talk about values pretty often, right? And I think that when we talk about like going against our values, we always talk about how it makes us feel. It often will not make us feel good, right? Sometimes we'll feel regret, shame, guilt, embarrassment if we do something that goes against our values. Well, it can also be something that over time doesn't feel as impactful. And I think it's really easy to get over that if as we continue to go down that path. Um,
I
but we'll never actually feel happy, I think is the important thing to remember. So, for example, like if, with Scrooge, for example, he prioritizes happiness. He's convinced himself, I mean, in money, and he convinced himself that his values tell him that money is the most important thing in the world, and all of his actions should always be about obtaining money. However, that's not true. It's a false idea that he has in his head. It's a false value to him. And over time, he gets very comfortable with just prioritizing money, but he never actually feels happiness. He may not feel badly like he did when he saw the one of his first loves, when he saw how she responded. That kind of highlighted that like he that it was a value. Love was a value for him at one point in time, but he convinced himself otherwise. And he got so comfortable with just going against his values to the point where he was almost numb to it, right? It didn't even bother him anymore. He could be mean, he could be, you know, rude, grumpy, and it just didn't care. He didn't care. He could refuse every Christmas invitation in the world. He just stopped caring. He was numb to it, but he was never
Yeah,
happy.
like that self-deceit thing. We've talked about it before. That's exactly what you're saying, and it makes so much sense. Where when you're first going against your values, that's a really hard thing. Like you'll feel it. You'll feel it inside of you. There'll be a push against it, and
Yeah,
then you kind of just convince yourself or like deceive yourself into saying, "All right, this is the right way." And then as it gets easier and easier to deceive yourself, you're getting further and further away from the person that you should have been or could have been or wanted to be.
right.
And that's a scary thing to wake up one day and be like, who the hell am I? I'm
Yeah.
unrecognizable, you know?
And like once we've actually seen, like, the awareness piece is what he gains in this whole
Yeah.
story. And once we see what we've created, it can be devastating, and that's what he experiences. His values become apparent when he becomes distraught, seeing his past and how the people reacted to him or spoke about him. Even seeing his own behavior was too much for him. At times, he's asking the ghost, and there's so many of the adaptations where they demonstrate this too, where he's saying, "Please, ghost, take me out of here. Please, ghost, show me no more." Things like that. It's like it becomes very clear that this man has been deceiving himself for a very long time. And now that he's actually seeing his behavior, he's seeing how people have responded to him, all the things he never actually paid attention to because he was so focused on money. It it breaks him. It
Yeah,
really
he
it
wasn't able
crushes
to
him.
deceive himself anymore. He was forced to see his true self.
You know, this story could almost replace money with like drugs,
Hmm.
any addiction, right? When you
Absolutely.
prioritize the addiction, the thing that you feel you need to have. Imagine if someone with addiction had this experience with these ghosts, and they saw all the things they created, all the people they hurt, all the things they've missed, all the experiences that they could have had, and
Mhm.
also the demise of people because of their actions, how that kind of caused other people to suffer.
The lives you destroy around you. Yeah,
Yeah,
especially it's a
that
great
I mean
sort of
it in some ways, isn't that the intent of an intervention, to
absolutely.
say
Like,
those
look at
things?
this. Like, look what you're doing.
Right,
Look
right.
at us. See
Scroo-
yourself.
Scrooge has an intervention.
He does, yeah. A divine intervention. Yeah. So, for a second here, to kind of get into our, maybe favorite representations and versions of
Yeah.
this story, like in pop culture. So, Dave, for me, I'll just name a few of my favorites, and you can tell me like where they stand in your world. So, the Flintstones surprisingly has a really good one. I think maybe Mickey's Christmas Carol is my favorite. I like Scrooged a lot with Bill Murray. But maybe my favorite is The Muppets Christmas Carol. I really like that one. I know everyone seems to think that the George C. Scott was the best one. Did you try that?
Oh, I watched it. I like that a
Yeah.
lot.
It's good. It's solid. It's serious, and I think that's pretty cool.
George C. Scott is like, he does so well in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he does great. But so does Michael Caine, and I know he's surrounded by Muppets, and that kind of takes away
No,
from
the Muppets one is great. I love it. But
he doesn't like make light of it. He like does his best acting, I think, even despite being surrounded by cloth puppets,
hey, the Muppets are they've been
Big
around for a
deal.
long time. They're
Big
yeah.
deal. Yeah. So I
So
love that.
yeah, you didn't bring up the Jim Carrey Uncanny Valley
Hmm.
animation version of this. which has been on. It was on Freeform a bunch this season, and it is hard to watch.
It sucks.
It is creepy.
Hmm.
You know what's unfortunate though is like it doesn't suck actually. Like story wise, dialogue wise, not bad, not bad at all. The animation is just so unsettling. It is
Yeah.
hard to watch.
Why does, because it is, why does the Polar Express get a pass on that though? Because it's very similar animation, but
You know
yet
what though?
people love it.
I don't go back to it that often. Like I watched it last year for the first time in a very long time, but like it's yeah, the animation it's worse in Scrooge, I think. I mean in the Christmas Carol.
Oh, it is,
I
yeah.
think it's worse. It's even worse than Polar Express.
Now,
But Mickey's Christmas Carol is my favorite.
it's so good.
I watched it again this year. I used to watch it all the time as a kid. It's I think it's great. And it's only
It's
26 minutes. It's
I
so
d-
fast.
and I
As a
remember
kid,
being
it
a
felt
kid.
I was
Yeah.
as a kid, it felt so long. And I was so devastated when Tiny Tim passed away
Uh-huh.
because they were so adorable.
Yeah, I know. It was tough.
And now I was like, and then watching it back, I was like, wow, Tiny Tim was like so short lived in this. It was like a freaking blink.
It's funny how when you're a kid like that feels so much longer and you really kind of I don't know, it was just like I remember just diving in and loving it and just getting lost in it and it was just
Yeah,
so good.
that
Like
was my favorite.
there's like little adult jokes and everything. It's just great. Like when he lifts up the house with the flashlight and he like a woman screams, you're like, okay.
And you know what also I picked up on watching it now was like there is so many obscure Disney characters in that film in that little 26-minute thing, like playing different characters. It's funny, like picking out like, oh, that's Figaro or that's
Yeah.
Jiminy Cricket's over there. I was pointing them all out the whole time. It was just funny seeing them all, and I was like kind of lost to me as a kid, or maybe I noticed, I just don't remember.
It's a great watch. It
I did
really is.
watch Scrooge last year, and I was like, it's I don't know, it wasn't it's very like aggressive.
Yeah, it is. I have a cool aunt though, and I think there's a nostalgia factor for me because we used to watch it together. I mean, she
Mm,
was a huge Bill Murray fan, and I am too. And I just, it's good though. It's good. Like that scene, you know, that scene with the present and with the Ghost of Christmas Present, and they're kind of Fred. It's not Fred in that movie, but like it's his brother. But like Fred is kind of like they're like making fun of him a little bit, picking on him a little bit. That scene in Scrooge is like really cool. It's cool they kind of like try to follow it. And it
yeah,
is long. It's
yeah, it
maybe a
is
little
long.
too long.
Yeah. Um, you have you watched the FX version of A Christmas Carol that was like the dark, mature rated? I didn't watch it. I
So
contemplated it, but
I tried it's okay. I guess it's sort of fan fiction and they really kind of go back into Scrooge's life and make it make sense a little bit more why he is the way he is. Um I don't know if that's necessary.
yeah, it
You
was
know?
short lived, right? That show. I don't think.
Yes, yes, it was. And that stinks though because I like that actor. Although he's a little uncanny valley too, for whatever reason to me. Who is it? The guy from Memento,
Oh, can't think
Guy
of his name.
Pearce
I
or
know.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I don't know what it is about him, but
There's this
yes.
there's this great line in Disney's Christmas Carol, Mickey's Christmas Carol, that I wanted to say, just because I thought it was great. It's when the nephew comes to visit him in the counting house, and Scrooge goes to him, if you give he because he said something about like giving it. It was that he's talking about how like he doesn't do anything with his money and all that stuff,
Mhm.
and they were talking about giving a donation, I guess, to charity. And he goes, if you give your money to the poor, they will. Oh no, that's what it is. These two characters walk in looking
That's
for
right. Yeah,
donations. It's the two from like the
Wind in the
Wind of the
Willows.
Willows.
Yeah,
Yeah. And he goes, and they're looking for a donation. He goes, if you give your money to the poor, they won't be poor anymore. If they aren't poor anymore, then you won't have a job. And then he kicks them out, right?
yeah. And
But
so maybe Disney did a good job of being like Scrooge is kind of quick and not I wouldn't say funny, but sarcastic. He's not a dope.
isn't that sort of the mentality about homelessness and the powers that be that look over the money that
Mhm.
kind of is used to address homelessness?
Yeah.
So it's
It,
almost that the rich stay richer, the poor have to stay poorer in order for this system to even exist.
for the people on the board to get their $1 million paychecks or whatever they are. I mean,
I,
of these like
I
home
mean, that
groups.
line was really spot on in so many ways. I was like, thought it, I was
Honestly, Dave, like we've talked about this kind of stuff before, like maybe off air, but it's like if we have a board of people on, Crossroads is our like home, maybe one of our homeless shelters, the biggest one, and maybe they run a bunch of them. There's board members, and they have like $1 million salaries. What is their incentive to really get rid of the homeless population?
exactly,
Like,
exactly.
why would you want to do that?
Apparently, they all watched Mickey's Christmas Carol, and they took this line to heart.
Oh man, it's just kind of, it, it's really sad to watch. I mean, we even have like these new little houses that they made for the homeless people, and the winter's going by, and they can't even get the homeless people in there because there's like all the red tape, as they say, right? I
Right.
mean, you can't even get them in there. It's kind of sad. But
It is very sad.
this is the season to be a little more generous. I will not be able to be too generous right now in lieu of what's going on with me, but maybe when things come back around, I will be able to do that.
Was that a maybe or is a promise?
That's a promise. If I will,
How much?
I'm
Tell us now.
5%.
5% of all your earnings.
Yep.
Okay.
I think I would do that. We should be giving something. You know what I mean?
He promised and said, I think I would. All
It's almost
right.
like that thing, like when you're like, please God, just get me out of this one. And then like as soon as you're
I
out of it,
swear I'll go to church every
yeah,
Sunday from
yeah,
here on
yeah.
out.
Yep.
And
I'll,
then,
ne- I'll never eat, like when I'm like my heart chest hurts, I'll never eat a Italian grinder again if you just let me pull through this. It
yep.
just doesn't work that way.
Nope.
So yeah, this was fun though, huh? This was a good one, and I'm
Yeah.
glad we did this. And
So a
Dave,
few weeks in the making because I actually started like getting the research for this one a little early. And then we had an extra week. So
I know, and
it
me
didn't
too.
hurt.
And I was actually worried that I was gonna forget a lot of what I had kind of looked at, and maybe I did, but I enjoyed talking about it anyway. It was good.
We got a
So Dave,
review.
we did.
So I just want to read that review for our listeners. Christian, oh, I'm gonna mess up this last name, so I apologize ahead of time. De la Vala De la Vella. Sorry.
Mhm. Get it right.
5 stars. Masterclass in making learning fun. Awesome. I like that subject. As a graduate student, psychology content can sometimes feel a bit stale or repetitive. And they say, I recently realized I am technically in 18th grade and let out an audible groan. I hear you. Dave and Greg take all of these talking points and add their own entertaining and informative twists. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much, Christian. That is genuinely appreciated.
Yeah, that's the exactly what we're kind of trying to do.
Um, Honestly,
So
couldn't
thank you.
have captured it any better because, yeah, that's exactly what our sentiment was. Very stale and repetitive. And also,
Although we would have never thought masterclass, but I'll take it.
I think also we would often kind of talk about how things felt almost like they weren't applicable at times or like
Yeah.
are like when we were talking is like are people actually doing the work that are saying these things because like so many times it was like once you're in the field you start to
Hmm.
see things differently than just when you're in that seat at school.
Yeah, like for those, I will mention something for the people in grad school. It's like that use of silence that they kind of pound into you. I mean, that's how,
Greg, are you saying that because you still struggle with it or are you
I mean,
saying that because you genuinely believe?
I remember asking, like, we had this one guy, professor, I can't remember his name now. But he was kind of, I don't think he was very well liked. But anyways, it he would say just, 10 minutes. Do you know how long 10 minutes of silence is?
Yeah.
I don't think that that's
No, you can't be silent that long. But
no.
all right, can I actually put you on the spot a little bit?
Sure, yeah.
So Greg's currently doing this group therapy thing, and I'm going to be doing it very soon as well. And we're both going to be, well, he's already and I will be co-facilitating with the same individual that works at our agency. And that individual has warned us many times that one of the main intentions for this group, it's an interpersonal group.
Mhm.
Um, don't ask me to describe it right now. But he's one of the intentions of the group is actually for us to be rather silent and
Mhm.
not feel like we need to fill dead air, not step in and start to provide guidance individually to members of the group. And he said that that is a struggle for most. He said it will probably be a struggle for me. And he said it's been a little bit of a struggle for Greg.
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, I was like, yeah, I can probably see that.
I am not doing any of those things. People have a problem and I'm like, let's solve that thing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah.
that's so like, someone says something interesting that you're like, oh wow, like we need to hear more about that. I'll kind of chime right in. Um, different styles for sure.
Yeah, I'm interested to dig into that group.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to hear what you think about it too.
I know it's gonna be good. So yeah, all right. Well, we will, obviously Christmas has already passed, so I'm hoping people can still find some appreciation for this episode, even despite it being on releasing on New Year's Eve. Uh, but if you don't, then just wait till next week and it will be nothing related to holidays. So we'll see you then.
Yeah.
In
Wait,
the
let's do it
meantime,
anyway. Worth a listen.
I also wanted to just note that we have switched our platform in which we release our podcast. So you will notice now there are videos on Spotify and on YouTube, which we've already kind of shared last week. But I have no idea if this is now, if that changed where we're able to be distributed. I don't know if it's less places or if it's the same amount. I don't know if anything's changed. If
Is it
anyone
still
is,
going to Apple? It is, right?
if anybody is listening and had to find this on a different platform because it was no longer on the platform they originally listened to, please let me know if you actually made the effort to find us on a different platform, if that's the case, or if anything's changed and you guys have noticed within the last week or two. Just please send us a message somewhere to let us know because we are like just wanting to make sure that this was supposed to be a really seamless change. And I have no idea to know if it actually is. So we would appreciate that. We still, as always, we ask and we also appreciate the people who have done it. But if you can leave a rating or review wherever you are able to do that, even Spotify, now I know you can. We will respond to you if you message us on there. That's great. And also, like I said, we're on YouTube. Not many people have made the transfer over to YouTube. That's fine. It is what it is. We'll still upload to there. But if you're on there, make sure you subscribe and give a thumbs up and all that good stuff. But that's about it. Anything else, Greg?
That's it for me.
All right. Everybody have a great new year. We'll see you in 2025. Thank you for listening. We appreciate you. Thank you for making 2024 such a great year for us within this podcast. I feel like it's grown so much. We've gotten to connect with so many great people through doing this. And also, I feel like it's just going to continue to build. So we appreciate you all for just kind of staying with us and watching our journey as we evolve in this podcast. So thank you and see you next week.
See you next week.